Hello and welcome. It's Matthew David, the Minister of Allowing. So we are here live on Sunday. And just wanted to come on here, and I titled this Just Another Day for You and Me in Paradise. That's the Phil Collins song. For some reason that came to mind. Welcome, Mikkel, Casey, Julian. So there's a lot going on in the world, isn't there? Welcome, Joel, Stephen, and Dennis. Thank you. Blessings to you as well. Yeah, Michael, we got that going on. So how about all of that craziness going on with all of the business shutdowns and all of the fear? There's so much to be afraid for these days, right? So much of that going around. Well, that seems to be what sells the best. Is fear always sells the best, and it keeps those who sell it in places of power. So more power to you. But I'm not going to fear. Anisha, Jean. So here's the deal. I was watching a very popular, very successful, very wealthy businessman who has a large following, probably one of the largest followings out there in the social space. He was in his RV talking about how he's bugging out because in California, they're running out of food on the shelves. You know, that the real serious thing is the real pandemic is the people's reaction to how they're triggered by what they hear and what they see. And so what do they see? They see these images of people walking around with, you know, radiation suits on. They got all these crazy goggles and then they hear all of these stories about famines and plagues and all of this. You know, this stuff was always told about in the Bible. It's all been there. So welcome Connie and Bobby and Nolan, Mitchell. And it's definitely going to affect your life. I'm going to promise you that it's going to affect you indirectly in some capacity, no matter who you are, because this is a worldwide thing. It's a thing. I'm not going to call it anything more than a thing, because all it is I call it a school. You know, I call it a test. And the test is going to be, well, are you okay with losing everything in your material world? Are you okay with that? Because if you're not okay with that, then you might have cause for some fear. Because the chances is that most people you know and most people around you are going to experience some sort of disruption in their day-to-day harmonious livelihoods, at least for a short temporary period, while the initial shock sets in of what people are creating within their own consciousness. See, this thing has to be created from within the minds of the people. The people have to create it. Now, I was told years ago by somebody that, you know, modern warfare is done, for instance, like making a movie where millions of people watch a ship sink, and by giving it their attention and by putting their eyes on it and creating emotion around it, they actually create it to happen through everybody's attention and focus. So it's like a hit job that they get you to buy into, and then it happens. So to me, this whole thing seems like that sort of a hit job. It seems more like we're being tricked into a collective belief in the making. And my opinion of it is that it's a bunch of BS. My opinion is that it's rather inconvenient more than anything, and it's going to test a lot of people whether they're going to respond with love or they're going to respond with fear or anger or some sort of problem that's going to destroy themselves. And so prepare for that, because I believe that even, you know, you can't turn on anything without people talking about it, which means that that's being created, because what you talk about, you create. So it's happening, and it's part of our world now. And so with that said, we're going to have to postpone our Mount Shasta workshop to a tentative new date, which is just one of those things, because with everything happening, it's going to be a problem with the traveling to and fro, most likely for people. And it kind of sucks because I want to be on the mountain. I want to go out and have some fun. I want to do this, and I'm going to do this. But in order for people to come and participate, it's going to have to be at a time when that level of comfort and security from within themselves is going to be there. And I'm not saying that you're that person, but I'm saying there are many people who are not very comfortable right now. So welcome, Bruce. Welcome, Edmund. Welcome, Antonio, Stephen. And so this reminds me of back when I had Lyme disease. I lived in fear, okay? I would much rather take the coronavirus than Lyme disease any day of the week, okay? Like, that thing doesn't scare me at all. All right. I think it's fake. I do. I believe that it's probably has to do with 5G more than anything. And it's completely a misdirection thing. And it's probably just to cover up the fact that the economy itself is just overinflated and it's just a big giant bubble that's popped. Okay. And there's nothing they're going to be able to do about it. So they got to sweep things under the rug somehow, like they've done all throughout history over and over and over again. And that's just the way the game plays. So those are my opinions. And I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like what I feel. I was born clairsentient, okay? So I was born with a very heightened spiritual sense. And I can go into a room and I can sense things that are just, you know, most people would have to tune into them and spend some time, and I can sense them immediately. I can know things right off the shoot. And what I feel when I go out is it's like this deadening effect. I feel like the world died emotionally. I feel like this was a kill switch for people's hopes and dreams. And you see, we just came out of one in 2008. We just came out of a rebuilding, or so it seemed. And we just came out of that. And then another shot that's heard around the world is fired. And while people may say, oh, I'm not scared of the corona, it's not going to do anything to me. And you're right, it probably won't. The chances of you actually being affected to the point where it's going to be, you know, taking you out, especially if you don't fear it, in my opinion, probably slim to none. However, financially speaking, when all the markets are disrupted, when they're tanking, when everything starts going crazy and the shelves maybe are empty, that's going to be different, isn't it? That's going to be a different experience. And humanity, in my opinion, that's, you know, this culture of, I don't know, like, we haven't lived that way in a long time, where people are used to growing their own food and doing any of their own needs. They're used to being handed everything by the fast food industry and the supermarkets and all this and that. And so that's why I developed this spiritual special forces in the first place. That's why God said to me, and I really believe this, a year ago, I said, I'm going to do this spiritual special forces. And we did it. We did not Mount Shasta, but we did our event. Michael Jacob came and he joined me, and we did our event, and we sent love bubbles, and we meditated, and we did training and skills. And this thing's happening. It's happening. And so Mount Shasta was a way I want to continue, but we don't have to go to the mountain to continue this. We need to raise our consciousness, okay? We need to raise our consciousness above at all times and not allow ourselves to be destroyed by the sweeping terror that's coming, because it's already coming. The media is a powerful, powerful weapon, because minds mingle. And especially if you're intuitive and sensitive to these things, like I am, many of you are, or you wouldn't resonate with my messages, you're going to be affected emotionally. And you see, this is the thing, is that out of the heart come the issues of life. See, so when it affects your emotional body, it starts to come out into the manifest creation. You see, that's the backdoor approach. The backdoor approach is it's called mesmerism. Mary Baker Eddy called it animal magnetism. Phineas Parkhurst Quimby called it minds mingling. Well, what we have is a virus of minds mingling right now. And their fear is spreading at a rapid rate. And fear is the fountain of poverty. Fear is the fountain of disease. Fear itself is the only thing we have to fear. We got to go back to that original statement. That is what's happening on the planet, is that there is epic fear. Bible talks about people's hearts will stop in the end days because of the fear. This is the type of fear that has been brought to the surface. So what is fear? It's a very, very low vibration. It is sin. It is turning away from God and to the ideas of men. Turning to the ideas of men is a problem because it puts you out of the covenant with God. It puts you into the covenant of sin and death. Romans 8. The minute you identify with a threat from out there, you have already presupposed a belief in two powers. And when you believe in two powers, you've already committed adultery in your heart. Now, I know you say, well, I didn't go sleep with someone else's wife. I'm not talking about that adultery. I'm talking about the original adultery when man left the oneness and became engendered and joined with this world, sleeping with sin. That is the real adultery, adulterated adults. The word adult means corrupt. The word itself, look at the etymology, adult is corrupt. You were innocent as a child. In fact, my son has become one of my best minister mentors right now. Okay? My son knows the gospel better than I do because his heart is purer than mine. God doesn't care how much knowledge you have in your head. Your knowledge is vanity to God. Man's knowledge is vanity to God. And isn't it interesting that they say, even on the TV, that the children, they don't get this thing. They don't get this plague that's sweeping the earth is not affecting the children. Isn't that ironic? Well, anyway, as I'm talking today, my son keeps reminding me, Dad, don't worry. We tithe to God. We're covered. We have a covenant. God's not going to let anything happen. We're good. And I'm like, I know, but everybody else is going to be tripping. And he's like, don't worry about it. He's like, we're good. Everything's good. And I'm like, my God, this kid's good. This kid is good. So I think next week I'll just have him come on and talk to you guys. He's the mentor. So welcome, Renee. Welcome, Angel, Braden, Stephen. And we got Randy here. All right. So what can you do? What can you do? Well, I really believe that a person who is in their full power has more power in their pinky than an entire government. I believe that you have more power in your pinky than an entire government. All right. It kind of reminds me of the story of, Mandela when he, I think that's who, I think it was Mandela. They threw him in prison and he ended up taking over the whole place and became part of the government. What did he do? He just loved. So it's love itself. It's love. It's love that gives you more power than the whole world. The ancient Gospels, the ancient Gnostic texts say that the world is not worthy of you. The world is not worthy of you. Imagine that. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to allow my consciousness to resonate with, is the awareness that, remember the 99.99997% empty space that quantum physics says is the world out there. And then you have the string theory and the quantum theory, and you have the idea that infinite worlds appear and reappear in the vast expanse of my consciousness like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light, and that there are no powers that be other than the power of God and love itself. And so what came to me today, and I talked about this on my private group when I do the Matrix Recode, is I want you to get this idea. I want you to get this. You only have one thing to do. There's only one thing that you can do that gives you more power than any government on this planet or any institution of so-called power. Those are all reactionary bodies of collective ignorance, okay? They gather and pool together and create a subsidiary authority system that is really a non-issue. Because if you feel, see, and be the perfection in your world, if you feel, see, and be the perfection in your world, in other words, from your heart, and walk from God in that space where you know the world is nothing but a trickster, nothing but a lying and deceiving father of lies that is a schoolmaster at best, designed for you to disrupt and to overcome. You're in the world, but not of it. And if you see it that way, and you step into it with faith and certainty that God cannot be defeated, God has already won the battle, and that you are to go about being in God's business, then your consciousness will be so high in those moments that you will raise the consciousness of dozens, hundreds, thousands, potentially even millions of others on this planet. Now, it also said in the ancient text that when Christ came, he caused that world to stir about and become agitated. And what I believe is true is that in fact, even the currency has ascended. I believe that's what the cryptocurrency revolution is that it is a new model of understanding of how currency flows throughout time and space in the reality that we live in. The continuation of currency flow is moving from the idea of centralized points of failure to decentralized points of data or factual evidence witnessed by you, by me, by other people who are self-leading authorities. Self-leading authority is what is disrupting the planet right now. So the essence of what you see happening is the Age of Enlightenment. What you're seeing, witnessing before your eyes, is the rising of the collective consciousness, busting through the terror barrier of fear itself in the collective ego framework. And so that collective ego framework that paints itself in a hologram of government and being governed by institutions of so-called corruption and power because they're built on centralized points of failure. Well, the cat's already been let out of the bag in 2008, and there's a new model on the planet. Now, I'm not telling you that Bitcoin's going to save your life. I'm not telling you that any of that stuff is going to be your savior. I'm telling you that that is the outpicturing of a new model of understanding how we fit in the world and how we relate to our currency flow. And so the currency flow itself has ascended within the model of man on the earth. And with that said, the old model is going out with a bang. It's going out with a vengeance. It's going out with a full swoop. So, what are you going to do about it? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do about it is obviously prepare a bit for what people are going to do during this process. They're going to become fearful and afraid, and they're going to be agitated because when disruption comes, it destroys the old. So the old is destroyed. It's never going to be the same again. It's in the phase of destruction right now. These are my opinions. I'm not telling you anything. I'm sharing with you my revelations that I'm perceiving as I witness what's happening. Now, you have to make your own judgments and your own calls, but what I'm suggesting to you is that when a new version of myself was showing up, when I had Lyme disease, the Lyme disease was the death of the old me. It had to go out pretty ugly. And it was painful. And it was a very hard, enduring process. And a lot of people on this planet may go through some very hard, enduring, painful times. And I told everyone this when I talked about the false start ghettos. I talked about how everybody's on these dopamine fixes, 8-second TikTok videos, anything to create an instant dopamine fix so that they can feel better now. Well, these are just things that are distracting people from true achievement and true ascension. Well, guess what? Many people are going to go through a different process, in my opinion, similar to what I went through with Lyme disease, or what people go through when they lose a wife or a spouse or an income or a job. That type of loss creates a very sharp emotional pain. And this is my concern, and this is why I'm going to minister about this, is that when that sharp emotional loss and pain comes, it's not easy to navigate through those turbulent waters unless wisdom is steering the boat, okay? You know, Jesus on the boat, be still and know that I'm God. He calmed the raging waters. You see, you're going to have wisdom in these times, because things might start stirring up. And your mortal sense of yourself, like when I was with my Lyme disease, my mortal sense over 36 times going to the emergency room, witnessing what could be the end every time in my fearful, afraid, doubting mind, doubting God at every juncture, doubting in the goodness of all that has bestowed nothing but perfection before me. Because of the reports of my 5 senses, I doubted God at every turn. But let me tell you how I corrected that and how I walked away from that entire disease process, is that through the process of going through it, the storm itself, I started to let go of my grip on fear. And I started to realize that if I die, well, maybe that could be a good thing, because what if I never die? What if there's no such thing as death? What if death itself is the very thing that has kept people controlled on this planet, in this matrix, at the low level consciousness of fear for so long, that once you bust through the wall of that stupid idea that you're going to die, and you realize you will never die, that you completely overthrow that entire system altogether? What if that's what it takes to completely disrupt that entire thing altogether? Well, when I walked away from that fear, that's when I got well. That's when I started demonstrating the man that God created, and not the man that the world created, Adam of the dust. So your job here is to know, are you Adam of the dust, or are you the man that God created? Now, my tip for you, financially speaking, is going to go counterintuitive to what everybody else is going to do. Everybody around you is going to hoard and penny pinch, and they're going to withdraw and withhold. God's hand never withholds. So my last couple weeks, I sowed nice tithes, nice big tithes, nice seeds. Do you think my mortal sense of self wanted to do that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, especially after eBay shut down my seller's account. But see, this is how I ensure that I'm going to be okay. You see, the irony is that I do the opposite of what the mortal self wants to do, and that's how I ensure that I'm going to be okay. And I want to tell you today what came to my heart when I asked God. God said, why don't you share Psalm 13 with them? And I read it, and it's exactly what I did and what I do and what I want to share with you. Now, if you want to prosper, you have to be the hand that gives. If you want love, you have to be the love that loves. If you want anything, you have to be the source of that something, no matter what is going on outside of you. because what's happening outside of you is a dream. And if you crumble and you get weak in the face of the dream, then the dream owns you. And it's always because of the fear of death itself. Whether it's you're afraid you're going to starve, that creates addictions of all kinds. Whether it's you're afraid you're going to be without love, you see, that creates all kinds of problems in people's lives. Every fear is the fear of death in disguise. So let me read Psalm 13 to you, and let me break this down for you, because I have a feeling that many people, when they're out of work for about, I'd say about 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe 6 months, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't know how long this is going to happen. But I will surmise to you that when your flow seems to be at risk, your mortal sense of yourself is going to say, hold on to every last bit. And you can do that, but what's going to happen is it's going to run out very fast, because that's all you got when you're coming from man's knowledge. When you're coming from God's fearless attitude towards life, then you got God, because you're coming from the source of the giver. Psalm 13 is a prayer for God's grace. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? Now, don't you feel that way sometimes when you see the media and you see all this stuff that's happening and how they're playing these tricks on people and they're creating this fear and they're coming after the joy itself? And just like David the psalmist pleading to God in those moments from his heart, how long? He's saying, how long will my enemy be exalted over me? How long is this thing going to happen? How long do I have to watch my stocks plummet, my cryptos tank, my everything shut down, the food is gone, and these things are no different than what David is pleading to God for. Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. So what David is saying is, show me your perfection so I don't fall into the dream of this nonsense, this terror in the night. Lest mine enemies say, I have prevailed against him, and those that trouble me rejoice when I'm moved. You see, David is saying, God, this stuff is happening. These shelves are empty. These businesses are shutting down. This money is drying up. This thing is spreading. And then he goes on. And he says, but I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord, because he had dealt bountifully with me. So what David is saying, again, this goes back to the formula that I discovered when I discovered the 3-2-1. Number one was to follow the fastest path to my joy in every moment, regardless of the fallout. David is saying that he is rejoicing in his heart, knowing that God has dealt bountifully with him. He knows the nature of God. He knows that if he is the image and likeness of that joy of the Father, in the face of all of this stuff sweeping the earth that is coming after his livelihood, his finances, his health, his family's future, he knows that God cannot be moved, God is never changed, and there is no power that has any governance or any authority that will trump the authority of God. And that is a formula right there. And when you are afraid and when you need it, This thing right here is a conduit for you to tap into that consciousness. So I made a video. It's on my YouTube channel. It's an older video, but it was the Psalms that you can use for the spiritual warfare. So I suggest that you read the Psalms while this warfare takes place. Not just for you, but for everyone around you that's going to be terrified. Because as you raise your consciousness, they raise their consciousness, because they sense in you the presence of God. And when they see the presence of God, they feel the presence of God, the peace in your heart. And that peace in your heart is the Savior that is going to bring destruction that is in this virus that is mentally sweeping the earth. And one person is more powerful than 1,000 fallen dead carcasses that are believing in the terror that sweeps the earth. You see, God's man is not the man that looks to that wickedness and makes joinder with it through fear. That is not God's man. God's man is forever held in the mind of God and walks amongst the mortals in the image and likeness of God, so that those who are looking can see the hand of God and can join and raise out of that dream, because it's a dream. So I wanted to share with you what's on my heart, and I hope you got some value out of that, because believe it or not, warfare is here, and you're not getting out of it without fighting. So welcome, Brian. Welcome, Ron. And Mary and Chris. Good to see you guys here. Premi. We got Mitchell and Joe and Jonathan, Gino, Teresa, Vernita. Good to see you guys. So my message is short and sweet. And welcome to the battle. I challenge you to step up. Spiritual Special Forces. You know what that means? You see, I started saying this stuff, and you can check my videos long before this started happening. Now, you see, special forces are the ones who win, okay? And they have to do things that most people won't do. And you're here. So if you raised your hand, then jump in and start becoming one mind with the Father mind, and get out of that sin and death consciousness and be about the spirit reflection of God and walk in it day and night. And what you'll do is you'll free the captives that are being held bound by Satan, because the real virus is in the mind. It's in the minds of men. As one of my former mentors says, it's the mental diseases. They've lost their mind. Corruption has reached a point where it is so beyond repair that it must just be obsolete at this point. And the only thing that destroys error is truth. So be about the truth, walk in victory, and by all means, do not let fear tempt you. If you need to cry, cry. If you feel it, go deal with it. But don't you for 1 minute step into fear. And if you do, step right out of it, because fear itself will take you out. Fear is a sniper, and fear will take you out fast. That's when I overcame Lyme disease, is when I no longer feared dying. I no longer feared it. I did not fear it anymore. And the reason why I didn't fear it anymore is because I believed that God's love forever holds me, my life intact, because my life is the life of God's expression. God expresses his love as your life, And there's not a single moment in existence where any claim of darkness can come against you unless you look to the darkness and you agree with it in your heart. That's it. If you don't agree with it in your heart, there isn't a single moment that it can come against you as a claim. Again, I'll tell you the examples and repeat it all over again. There was once this general, and he had a small army, and they captured him. They put him in this hallway, and they were going down the aisle and killing all of his men in ranking order from the lowest to him, the general. And as they started executing his men, like this thing sweeping the earth as it's executing the finances of those around you, and it's executing the store shelves, and people are starting to pretend that this thing is real and creating it in their mind and walking in it. It finally got to him, and he had no fear. He knew that God's love was the only reality in all of existence, and there was never anything outside of it that was ever created. They looked at him, they shrugged at him, and they walked away and left because they couldn't touch him. Same thing happened with Mary Baker Eddy. She raised her consciousness by reading the Word of God. Guy walks into her study with a gun. As he pulls it out on her, that consciousness of love disabled him. Started shaking, walked right out and fled. He fled. The darkness flees when your consciousness, your love is present. All darkness. So I challenge you, and me, I'm going to do it too. You know, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I've had a moment today. I did a matrix recode. It's a very deep dive process of feeling what's in your heart and digging it out. And I've been fasting with it so that the fasting allows me to really go into these things and heal them. And I got sad today for a couple hours, and I felt a lot of pain in my heart. And I dealt with it. But one thing I didn't do was I did not allow fear for more than a moment to take any place inside of me. I kept turning to God, just like I did when I had Lyme disease. As soon as fear came knocking, I turned to God. As soon as fear says, I'm taking this away from you, I'm coming against you, I'm taking your business out, I'm taking your finances out, I'm taking the food off those shelves, I'm going to take out people that you know with this virus. As soon as fear says things like that to you, you turn to God and you say, God, your love is the only truth, the only power, and the only substance in the universe. And what did David say? I will praise God, and I will sing songs of joy to him in the midst of the battle. That's the formula. That's how it's done. That's your weapon. That's how you use the weapon. So now I'm saying, go out and use the weapon, please. Because if you do it and I do it, guess what? One person has more power in their pinky than an entire army. So if you're committed and I'm committed and we go out and we do it, I don't really see a fighting chance at all for this thing that is trying to sweep the earth right now. I see the defeat of it because God has already won the battle. So let's do it. That's my challenge. And that's my live stream for you guys tonight. Take care. God bless. Love you. And see you next week.